right, welcome everyone to another edition of our community call series. Today is going to be a pretty fascinating topic on different types of exit strategies for climbing gyms. Really just kind of giving you a broad scope of what kind of options are out there and what sorts of things you should be thinking about as you look to the future. And this is applicable information both for emergency situations, but also things that you might have to consider later in your life or as you transition to different parts of your life as well. So really broadly useful info here. Um, give you a quick overview of Zoom, cover our ground rules, and then we'll dive right into Bill's presentation. So as always, we'll be using the question and answer tool that Zoom has, and you can find that right at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and start entering those questions as soon as you have any, and we'll address them both during the call if it's a good time, or after the presentation is over, depending on the nature of the question. You can always chat amongst them yourselves. You guys have already been doing that. Great job. And during that question and answer period, feel free to raise your hand if you have any question that you'd like to say out loud rather than typing into the question and answer box. I did want to point out that in that question and answer tool, you do have the ability to ask anonymous questions. So if you have a question that's a bit more sensitive or you don't want to be identified with it, feel free to go ahead and check that box, and you'll be able to ask that question without any sort of identifying information at all. Our ground rules, as always, will be to be polite and respectful to each other in the chat, to Bill with any questions or comments, and to everyone on the CWA staff as well. We'll keep any personal political commentary out of this discussion. If we do unmute you during that question and answer period, just keep your comments to around 2 minutes so that we have time to cover everyone's questions. And then anyone who does violate our rules, we will unfortunately have to remove you, which we haven't had to do yet, but just to give you a little bit of warning there. So I'd like to introduce Bill McBride, who's graciously agreed to share his experience around this topic. He's helped a number of companies transition and probably seen many more. So a wealth of experience there. Bill's been working in the fitness industry for over 25 years and really at all levels. He co-founded a company, Active Wellness LLC, and he also owns a health club consultancy, BMC3. In previous years, Bill has served as the chairman at URSA, which many of you might be familiar with, as well as on the board and advisory boards for other organizations in the fitness industry. He's been an active author on industry education and also serves on individual companies' advisory boards where some of these kinds of topics can come up. So I'm going to hand this over to Bill and let him kick this off. We have a really in-depth and just fascinating presentation for you guys today. So I'll let you go ahead and share your screen, Bill, and kick us off.
Thank you, Garnett. I appreciate that. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Chloe. Very honored to be here today with you. This is my first presentation that I've done with the Climbing Wall Association. And I want to share some things specific to exiting the business, strategies around exiting the business, and some of the things will make sense even if you're not planning to exit. I'm going to go pretty quickly through this. We'll be paying attention to the chat box for questions. We'll try and work the questions in if they are relevant to the topic at hand. If not, we'll try and hit them at the end of the session. I've included my email address, and we'll also make this deck available to you should you want to have a copy of it and review it. So, without further ado, we'll jump right in. Today's agenda, I want to talk a little bit about pre-exit strategy. What things do you need to keep in mind before you consider exiting your business? What's the actual strategy look like? What are some of the options? How do you consider valuations? What are some of the things to think about? And then decision-making time. We're in a weird time right now with COVID-19. I don't know any of us that have not been adversely affected in our business lives, and many of us in our personal lives. But looking at this, we're going to come at it from a couple different angles. We're going to come at it from the angle of normal times, you have some leeway and you're planning an exit. We're also going to come at it from, man, things are not where they need to be. What do I need to be doing today? And then we're going to also hit at the very end, the very unfortunate circumstances. What happens if you have to exit by closing your business, not selling it or exiting in a much more orderly or preferable fashion. So we will have a slide on that towards the end of the presentation. I've been involved in many transactions, selling gyms, buying gyms, closing gyms. I want to qualify that while I've been involved in many transactions, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CFO. I'm not an exit strategy, M&A, mergers and acquisitions person. I don't do valuation reports, and I don't facilitate transactions. This is me coming to you as an operator talking to an operator. This is how I look at the business. This is how I prepare. This is how I've done it with regard to looking at my locations when it's come time to exit some of them. So this is not a kind of a legal accounting. We will talk about some legal ramifications. We will talk about some accounting aspects, but I'm coming to you as an operator. And I want to just make that clear so you know the frame of reference that we're dealing with today. So strategy is a interesting word, right? It's a careful plan or method. We kind of know what strategy is. I bring this up as a definition now only because it's critical that if you're looking at exiting your business, you need to write it down. You need to put the thought into it. You need to put pen to paper and structure it out, your thoughts and all the ramifications that go into it. This is not an exercise or drill that you can do ad hoc, that you can shoot from the hip on, that you can kind of just make up as you go along. You want to really be methodical and write it down and really plan it out. And I'm not saying overly bake it. I'm not saying spend months and months and months working on every nuance, but I am saying it is important not to just do it in an ad hoc fashion. It's kind of like retirement, your retirement plan, your retirement savings. A lot of us spend more time planning our vacation every year than we do planning our retirement allocations. This is something that requires a little bit of sit down time to really come up with a plan. When you talk about strategy with regard to exit strategies, you're also talking about some art and some science. The science of all the things that you can control, the art of intuition, the art of perception, the art of understanding your marketplace, the art of understanding the soft aspects of the value proposition that you have. So the reality is a lot of businesses fail. 8 out of 10 businesses fail. And typically they fail for one of 5 reasons or a combination of 5 reasons. Not in touch with customers through a deep dialogue. In our industry, that's not so much the case. Most of you on this call are passionate about what you do. You're passionate about your customers, you're passionate about your staff, you're passionate about your activities and lifestyle. So that's usually not the case with a lot of us in this current space. The other issue is there's no real differentiation in the market. There's no value proposition that the market says is important. That's probably not the case in our space as well. When you talk about climbing gyms and climbing lifestyles, you're talking about a niche. You're talking about a differentiator. You're talking about something that's special. So that's probably not necessarily one of the bigger reasons in our space. Failure to communicate value proposition in a clear, concise, competent manner. So it's really compelling for the consumer. That's something a lot of us can do a little bit more work on. How do we get new people into our space? How do we get new people into our lifestyle? Tennis was struggling for years with young people not playing as often as the existing population within the tennis industry. Golf went through a period of the same thing. These are modalities that require, for continuous growth, entrees for beginners to be able to come into the space. And we have to communicate that value proposition and constantly bringing people in. Otherwise, our lead sources, our market share, our market acquisition begins to dry up a bit. Leadership breakdown at the top, dysfunctional founder, dysfunctional leadership. That's another thing that goes wrong with many businesses. I'm sure we have no dysfunctional individuals on this particular call, sans maybe myself. Inability to nail a profitable business model with a proven revenue stream. This is a big challenge going forward. Many of us have found ourselves in situations where we have reduced revenue, if not zero revenue at the time being. And when we come back out of this mess, what's our revenue model going to look like? Do we need to charge more because we're going to have less customers? Do we need to charge less so we can get more customers? But figuring out that business model. So one or a combination of these 5 things are what really hit businesses hard with regard to failure. Now, with the COVID-19 circumstance that we're all in, there's the stimulus financial programs. Many of you may have taken advantage of some of these. If you haven't, they're worth looking into. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through these in detail, but you've got the payroll protection program, which gives a certain amount of payroll forgivable, and then a low interest rate loan, typically 1% or a little bit more. You have economic industry and disaster loans available. You have emergency grants. You have local and state programs, and you have other SBA programs. Traditional SBA programs, as many of you may be aware, require a lot of times personal guarantees. I personally don't like personal guarantees on my business. I avoid them at all costs. Personal guarantees can be risky. A lot of times we're very passionate about what we do, and we do personal guarantees to get open. That's not necessarily a bad idea, but you want to have a lot of caution when you go into a business where you have to sign for personal guarantees. And you also want to plan for, worst case scenarios with regard to your financial circumstances. So what's the survivability checklist? What do I need to survive all this? What's my business model? Is it viable coming out of this? If you didn't have a viable business model going into COVID-19, you've got a short window of time to figure it out. It'll be much more challenging. What's your relationship with your landlord? During times like this, it's very important to be transparent with your landlord, share financials, share your goals, share your circumstance. Be very, very, very transparent and clear. Use your landlord as a true partner, if at all possible. You also want to be careful about negotiating with your landlord for the short term that may seem like a good idea for survivability, but may put you in a bad spot for the long term. So in any landlord renegotiations and conversations right now, you really want to be thinking not just surviving the next 3, 6, 12 months, but what's it look like 3 years, 5 years down the road, and making sure that you're not coming from such a place of crisis management that you enter into deals that are not good long term. A lot of people have furloughed their staff. It's better to furlough staff than to keep them on and burn cash flow that may not be forgivable in some type of stimulus program and exhaust your cash reserves. So don't be afraid, intimidated, embarrassed, feel like you're doing the wrong thing by furloughing employees. If it's necessary for the long-term survival of your business, it's a good thing for your employees as well. They would much rather have an ongoing job for a long period of time than 2 months of 3 months, 4 months of pay, and then the business not survive. This is an era now of cost containment. Every business in the country, if not world, is looking at how they reduce costs, how they manage expenses, how they optimize the performance of their organizations. So looking at every expense, and I'm talking about the subscriptions that you have on your credit card that you forgot about. I'm talking about going through and looking at every single line item on your financial statements and personal budgets. Revenue and pricing. Does my revenue and pricing make sense? Will it make sense coming out of this? Are there any ancillary options I can do to generate revenue and keep my customer base connected to me? Yeah, I'm talking about virtual digital streaming. Are there training programs that you can put in place virtually for your clientele that better prepare them for the activities that they love and enjoy? Are there outdoor excursions or remote programs that you can do that for additional fees? I know you might not view yourself as a trip planner, but maybe you are. And if you're not, maybe that could be something to add to your quiver as far as another arrow. Charging a certain amount, putting groups together, taking them out on outdoor excursions. They don't necessarily have to be rock climbing excursions. You could do just a heavy hike, lunch, a boot camp exercise routine, and then a hike. What can you do to create and continue to maintain and foster the community that you've created already? And how can that be accretive to your business, add value financially or in a retention manner? And then managing cash flow. Cash flow is a lot different than net income. Net income's a P&L item. You could have positive net income, but still be strained on cash. So really focusing and managing and making sure that you're managing your cash flow. So those are kind of the things that I wanted to just hit on from what do I need to be looking at right now in crisis mode? Now let's get to the core of what we wanted to talk about with regard to exit strategies, all right? The pre-exit strategy is what do I need to do before I put the exit strategy in motion? Your goal is to have a valuable business that has value to another individual or organization. That's going to require that you have a strong value proposition, that your price, your revenue are in excess of your value chain, your expenses. So what will your consumers pay and how much does it cost you to deliver that, creating a positive margin of profitability. You have a short horizon to increase your profits and valuation. Most of the time when we look at selling a business, in a perfect world, we'd have at least 12 to 18 months to plan it out and optimize the business in every way. That's not realistic in many cases. Many people find themselves in a situation where they may have 3 months to 6 months. The more time you have to be thinking about exit strategies, to be thinking about what you would do should you want to end the ownership of your business, the better it will be with regard to your ability to drive certain levers. So when you decide that an exit is in your plan, that's a good time to start doing a few things. One thing, clean up everything possible. Clean up your HVAC units, clean your vents, your plumbing fixtures, paint where you can. Make sure all your equipment's in good repair. Make sure the space is organized. Make sure the carpets are clean. Everything that you can control to make the site present as best it can. I mean, this is a good practice anytime, even if you're not selling your business, but it's especially a good practice if you're going to be showing people your site for consideration. If you're going to be negotiating with your landlord, you want to show psychologically that you're taking care of the space, that you're doing all the things possible, that it's in really good repair and in a pristine manner to the degree possible. So I'm talking about repair versus replace in most cases. How do you get everything in your house in order? Second is to consider dues increases or increases in services or products, increasing the rates, increasing what you charge individuals. If you own your building, you own your land and you own your building, which for a lot of us is not the case. Probably the vast majority of that's not the case. But if you do, you want to get an appraisal of your property, a real estate appraisal. And that's just an appraisal from somebody that's certified or member of the Managerial Appraisal Institute. So if you have real estate involved in your business that you control and own, you want to have a real estate valuation to know what the property's worth external of the business. Again, that may not be the case for many of us. In a perfect world, your business has a strong go-forward strategy, including the caliber of instructors, the caliber of staff, the performance of the business. Selling a business that's going to basically go out of business shortly after the sale is not a valuable proposition for anybody. So you want to make sure that you're telling the story, showing the story, showing the forecast that has a viability to it, that has a go forward strategy, and you want that to be real. You want that to be authentic. Every dollar you make or save right now could have an exponential return on the valuation of your business. And by that, I mean most businesses are going to sell for a multiple of earnings. And so if the multiple is 2, 3, 4, 5, every dollar's worth $2, 3, 4, $5 of additional incremental profit. So really thinking through how you streamline and how you operate efficiently. And I'm not talking about operating so leanly that you can't grow and that you can't deliver your experience to your customers. But I am talking about optimization. You want to adjust all your expenses to normalize business expenses. And what do I mean by that? I mean that many small businesses, medium businesses, are running personal expenses through the business. You might be running your car through the business. You might be running other services through the business. You might be, using the business as part of lifestyle, your lifestyle in a more global fashion. I'm not judging that as right or wrong. What I am saying is that it makes your P&Ls harder to understand for a potential buyer. So you want to clean those up, and by clean those up, I mean normalize them. Make sure that you have P&Ls for your business that are the true cost of just the business, so that you don't have any other expenses that are not related directly to that business being a separate sole entity going forward. So take your profits and salary or distributions and try and normalize your P&L so they're very easy to understand. So they're very easy to understand for a prospective buyer, that everything flowing through the business is necessary for the business and can be evaluated as the buyer saving or maintaining those expenses as is for true valuations, if that makes any sense. Rumors are very problematic in this space, the space of trying to sell a business. You need an extra element of discretion. People make up information when they don't have all the facts. So if people know that you're looking to sell the business or exit the business, they may buy less with regard to packages. People may be defensive. They may not refer others. They may just attrit away. So be very careful not to let anybody know outside of your most trusted inner circle that you're looking at doing something like this, that you're looking at a potential exit. Same thing with vendors. Vendors talk to all of their customers and word gets out. So rumors can have a very detrimental negative effect. And typically when an owner sells the business, it's for all the right reasons. Maybe they've lost a passion for the business. Maybe they want to do something else with their resources and time. Maybe they want to retire. Whatever it is, typically that winds up being a good thing for the business because new energy comes in, new investment comes in. And so typically when you sell the business, it can be really good for staff and it can be very good for customers. But that's not what people believe and think when they first hear about somebody selling a business. They tend to go to a darker place. So being aware of that. What are you trying to sell if you sell your business? Understanding that we're trying to sell an operating model. People pay for X services and access. You have X cost. There's a margin there. That's kind of obvious. But you have other things. You might have intellectual property. You might have a strong name in the marketplace that has some goodwill to it. You might have a training program or methodology that you employ to condition people with regard to the lifestyle. You might have a strong playbook on how your business is run. You might have branded programming. So looking at all the assets that you have with regard to your business and which of those assets have value to potential buyers. So now we're going to talk and move a little bit into what do you need to do to have a strategy with regard to exiting. The first thing you want to look at is just getting your house in order and getting prepared. The second is, why do you want to exit the business? Is it out of a want and desire, or is it out of a need? What are your goals, personal goals? Why are you doing this? So getting your house in order, being very clear on what your reasons are, what are your long-term goals around this, and then looking at, well, who would be interested in buying this business? Who would be the likely buyers? And the 4 steps in planning for a potential sale. One is an independent valuation. Diagnose the current circumstance. What is the business worth? Now, there's a question from Lauren out there. Lauren, thanks for the question. Asking if you have any advice for managing partners who might be looking to exit, but maybe not everybody's looking to exit. This is where that independent valuation comes in, making sure that everybody knows the true value of the business, so conversations can be had to potentially buy out various partners or replace them with other partners. But independent valuation would be step 1. Preparation for sale. Determine the asking price and determine your bottom line. The asking price probably is going to be higher than your bottom line. Your bottom line may be 0. Here are the keys. Please take over my lease and my equipment lease and whatever else. Your bottom line might be, I want to get $100,000 out of the business and relieved of all of my obligations. I don't know. Whatever that is, whatever your bottom line is, you need to know that number, and you need to determine your asking price above that. Now, your asking price is really going to be dependent on the value that somebody sees in purchasing the business and the valuation that we talked about in step 1. So in this preparation phase, collect all the materials you can collect regarding your business that are relevant. That would be your lease, any amendments to your lease, your inventory, any loan information, any industry data, what you could expect is going on in your market. The university outlook is important in a lot of our locations. What's the student return rate looking like? Is the university population growing around me? What's the corporate tenancy doing? Are workers back? Are they coming back? Is the corporate market growing around me? Are more houses coming in? What's the housing data? What's the potential in the market for growth? But gathering this type of information, because you want to put it all together for what we'll call your book. And your book is simply all the information that you have about your business that you were willing to share with somebody so that they can evaluate the business and their interest in purchasing it. Depending on if you're looking at somebody inside the industry or outside the industry, you're going to have 2 different marketing approaches. So you might be looking at selling to someone inside the industry. This could be your existing customers. This could be your staff. This could be competitors. You could be looking at outside the industry. This could be a wealthy individual that's interested in owning the business. This could be ancillary businesses that may say climbing gyms would be a good ancillary business to my current business. I might want to add that to my functional training business. I might want to add that to my health club business. I might want to add that to one of my other businesses as another lifestyle product for a broader offering. Advertising plan is probably not going to be as relevant for us based on the sizes of most of our businesses and the local nature of it. But sometimes it could make sense to look at advertising anonymous ads in regional editions of some of the publications. I wouldn't say that would be the main source at all in our particular space. You need objectivity, a third party. And I'm not talking about hiring an expensive consultant. I'm talking about a family friend, a business colleague, somebody you know in your market, a banker, a lawyer, an accountant, a business person. But you really want somebody when it comes time to interface with you and potential buyers. Why? Because there's a lot of emotion in selling our own stuff. If you've ever sold a car or you've ever sold a house, you know the emotion that goes into selling your own stuff. So it's good to have that separation, that objectivity. So have that person, she or he, screens the potential buyers, shares the information, maybe arranges access to the facility, follows up, helps with the negotiations, personally deals a little bit with potential buyers so that you're getting some support in the negotiation process. And you have somebody that's outside of it and not emotionally tied to the transaction. This third-party person can also help with the transition. Like I said, this doesn't have to be a highly paid, external consultant. This could be a family friend or a personal friend or somebody that you trust. So what are some of the options that we're looking at? Selling to a competitor is one. Selling to a consolidator, somebody, like I said, that's trying to put together a few different lifestyle products. Selling a private equity group may or may not make sense based on the size of most of our businesses. Many people that are involved in our association have multiple locations. So there might be some interest in something there. Looking at local companies that may be interested in what we provide, but don't offer something like that. Universities a lot of times have their own fitness facilities. Some of them do external programming. It could fit with a university program. It could fit possibly with a hospital that has a medical wellness offering. It could fit with a company that wants to augment some of the offerings they're doing in other lifestyle spaces. It could be with nonprofits, community centers. Some of these may not pan out. Some of them may not make sense at all in your particular circumstance. But you want to make a list of all possible options. It's kind of like a brainstorming drill. There may be an outsider that's non-industry but local, a family member, a friend, an investment group that's really interested in it, a group of doctors, a group of lawyers. So there could be an outside group that maybe not in our industry, but is interested. There could be a staff member or group of members, staff members, that may have an investor or may want to invest on their own. Some businesses that are small to medium do an ESOP, an employee stock ownership plan. I don't know that that's the most likely for our rock climbing gym locations. I'll tell you a little bit more about ESOPs in a minute and why that may or may not make good sense. Doing a co-op where a group of people buy the business. Having a family succession plan. Is there a son or a daughter or somebody that you want to take over the business? Realize that most businesses, not specifically in the rock climbing gym space, but most businesses struggle with multiple generations surviving the life of the business, or the business surviving multiple generations, rather. So in this business with a lifestyle product, we tend to do better with multiple generations continuing because there's a lifestyle growing up in it and a passion around that. So there tends to increase the success rate with family succession planning in our space, more so than a lot of other businesses. Even with everything going right in exiting the business, it's probably going to take longer than you would want it to take or expect it to take. So these options that I put out, you could be looking at this going, Bill, that's not viable, that one's not viable. That's fine. The goal here is what is viable. Brainstorm, write every single thing out that's possible. Some businesses outsource. They decide they don't want to run and operate the business to the level they were doing before. They hire a management company to operate it. Somebody takes care of all the aspects of running the business, and you still own it. You still have the risk. This could be an option in our space. It makes it a little more challenging because our owner-operators seem to be the ones with the highest proficiency and level of skill set in delivering the experience to our customers. So this may not be an alternative for exiting the business completely. It could be exiting all the business aspects of the business with still staying involved in being the primary professional that's driving the experience. But again, just another option. So how do you get to what is this thing worth? How do you get to coming up with some valuations? First, you look simply at the condition of the gym and the equipment. Is there a lot of deferred maintenance? What's the age and condition of what we have going on here? Is the revenue trending up or down? It's hard to create a lot of valuation in a business if the business is losing money or trending down without a rationale that it will reverse and grow. What is the competitive landscape? What's the supply in the market versus the consumer demand? How many competitors do you have, if any, in your marketplace? What's the business model viability? If you have any prepaid services, prepaid memberships, prepaid sessions, prepaid time, you have to reduce that because a buyer won't pay you for money you've already taken out of the business. So we just have to be cognizant of that when we're doing our P&L. Are there any existing leases or real estate? We talked about the real estate appraisal. Should you own the real estate? What's the lease look like? Are there rent escalators? If I buy your business, can the landlord throw me out next week, or do I have renewal options on the lease? How much time is available under the current lease, and what are those options for renewal? Basically, you're looking to get to a third-party normalized site EBITDA, fully loaded. And EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. It's basically an adjusted net income. Okay, so this is the earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So typically in the fitness market, businesses will sell at a multiple of EBITDA. And typically you also want to have a reserve for replacement of CapEx, which typically is a balance sheet item, but budgeting 3 to 5% for capital improvement, site improvement. So independent valuation multiples. These could vary. Like I said, I'm not an acquisition and mergers and acquisitions expert, but in the typical fitness arena, fully loaded club valuations are 2 to 5 times the trailing 12 months adjusted EBITDA. And by that, I mean that 12 months of earnings, 2 to 5 times that amount is typically the asset value of a operating business. It could be higher if the real estate is owned. Of course, you're making some adjustments of EBITDA down for prepaid services, accounts receivable, accounts payable, reconciliation, the reserve I talked about for replacement, CapEx, and owner's compensation. So you would adjust these things to have an adjusted EBITDA, but you're really looking at how's this business doing the last trailing 12 months. Now, if you're closed because of COVID-19, you would obviously be using 12 months prior to closure. Most buyers will want to look at the last 3 years. if not 5 years of performance. But the value typically, is based on the last 12 months, unless there's some kind of anomaly. So evaluating businesses. There's a cost method. What would the replacement cost be for a new buyer? There's the sales comparable approach, which is if you've ever sold a house, this is the comps. What did other houses in the market sell for? This is kind of hard to do with regard to an operating business because there's so many dissimilarities between other operating businesses. And then there's the income approach, which for the fitness and gym business, this is the best reasonable approach that most likely would be the case. Discounted cash flow, best reasonable future projections, discounted to current dollar value terms. That's not really relevant in our industry. Capitalized earnings method, the earnings over a period of time, how a normal club would behave. Accrual method of accounting, is what I talked about earlier. You adjust for the crazy things, you normalize. You normalize compensation for owners to make sure that's a reasonable market-driven rate. Consider non-direct operators as distributions. So if there's other people being paid out of the business that aren't working actively in the business, adjusting those out. If owners are operating the business, remove that cost and add back the equivalent of what a normal operator would cost. If the owner's taking more compensation than it would require if you hired, say, a manager or somebody else that could do that. So you're basically just trying to normalize the cost of what a third party would have in running the business going forward and trailing 12 months. We've already looked at some of the aspects that go into the income approach. Last 12 months, you're going to want help with your P&Ls being properly stated and reviewed, and you would probably use whoever you use as your accountant, your tax accountant, or your bookkeeper to help get that stuff in order. Some other considerations that we need to go through and think about. Are membership agreements, if you have them, assignable to a new owner? So if you have contracts with your customers, can you assign those to the new owner? Or will every customer have to sign a new agreement? This may or may not be applicable in your situation. Will your landlord accept a new tenant to take over your lease? Can you assign your lease? That's why it's always good to have a really strong relationship with the landlord. And to make sure that a lot of our leases have clauses in there that you need landlord consent to assign the lease. So your new buyer of your business or whoever takes over your business would probably have to have as good, if not better, financial wherewithal as you for your landlord to take you off of the guarantees and to allow somebody else to take over the remainder of the lease. So you want to really be clear about what your situation is with your current lease and assignability and the wherewithal of your new person coming in working with the landlord. Is a new owner planning to stay active in the business, or is this an investment for them? And if so, are you willing to stay as a consultant or an employee in supporting the business with new ownership? Franchises are a whole new deal. If there's a franchise involved, then you would need typically permission from the franchisor to transfer the franchise to another individual. That's just some general information about fitness type exit strategies. Are you willing to have a holdback escrow account where maybe you sell the business and you get X amount of money and then you take the rest of the money over time based on either the performance of the business or just allowing a note for the individual to pay you over time. having a note with a group of employees or a group of customers could allow a group to be able to get you closer to your sales price because you may make it easier for them not to come up with the cash up front. Again, this gets back to what is your motivation for selling the business? Is it to get out from the obligations and future obligations? Is it to take money off the table and make a revenue? If it's, depending on what your goals and motivations are, will dictate how you might structure some of these things like the holdback and so on. Get a non-disclosure agreement before you have any conversations about this with anyone. Have all parties and advisors sign an NDA. Architects, consultants, brokers, potential buyers, before you share the P&L and the book and all the different pieces of information, you want to make sure that you have a non-disclosure agreement. Again, you're trying to mitigate rumors, you're trying to mitigate speculation, especially if you're just doing some exploratory work to see what your business might be worth. There's different types of transactions. Two that are really predominant are a stock purchase, where somebody buys the stock. That usually is a good deal for the seller because all the liabilities of the business go with the new ownership. There's typically some audit requirements when you do it that way. Most common and what most buyers are going to want and what most transactions in the fitness and gym space are asset purchases. Somebody buys the assets of the business. The assets could be your customer list, your equipment, your lease, your goodwill, your name, your training programs, your IP, all the things we talked about before. They buy that, and you still maintain all of your pre-sale liabilities. So if you had a member injury that turned into a lawsuit prior to the sale, that would still stay with you and your insurance. So you want to make sure that you maintain your liability insurance through the termination date of your business, because in an asset sale, you'll maintain those legal responsibilities of what happened while you were the owner of the business. Workers' comp claims, all of that stuff is your responsibility up until the day you sell the business. So if you do an asset purchase, make sure you maintain your insurance through that whole process. Once the transaction occurs, the new owner would have their insurance and they would take over those things. But in this case, you would terminate all the staff, you would terminate all your vendor agreements, and the new buyer would hire the staff that they wanted and re-engage with all of their vendor agreements and so on. So basically, you're ending the business and they're picking up the business and taking it from there. You probably don't need an investment banker. Typically, that's only for really large transactions. There's not very many club or gym type brokers in our industry that specialize in representing clubs on a nationwide basis. That third-party professional, looking at the geography of potential buyers, understanding when to tell staff that you're thinking about doing this, how to handle staff rumors. Be prepared so you don't wind up saying something you regret later. You want to really map out what you might share and when, and being prepared to handle any rumors with members. Again, being very clear on what's going on. An ESOP is an employee stock ownership program. Basically, it's when you sell the business to the employees and you maintain control. There's a lot of things that are advantageous about it from a tax standpoint and some other things. Some of the issues are to administer the annual cost to support the trust can be expensive. So for smaller transactions, ESOPs tend not to make the most sense. If I were selling a traditional fitness health club, an ESOP would not make the most sense in most cases because of the annual administrative cost. But that is out there, and that is an option. So let's say, worst case scenario, you decide that you have to close your site. God forbid, and hopefully none of us have to go through this, but let's say you do. You want to make sure that you really think through all the implications and all the audiences. Conversations with your partners, that transparency with your landlord, transparency with your bank, transparency with your vendors, working with your employees and members, your public relations and communication plan, making sure you deal with state and local laws that are applicable. If you're looking at a bankruptcy situation, understanding, the right way to go and getting legal advice. Chapter 11 typically is reorganizing the business and moving it forward. Chapter 13 is typically structuring it to repay off some of the debt. Chapter 7 is basically closing it down. They sell off all the assets to repay what debts there are. Again, not legal advice, but if you are in a situation where you have to look at a closure, making sure that you really think through all the different audiences and do it in an orderly fashion to your advantage, which typically, when done right, can leave you in a good place without some of the obligations that you might fear if it was done in a less organized manner. Again, hopefully that doesn't come to any of us, but understanding what goes into that process. So, other good resources, if you know anybody that's sold a gym before or any other small business, anybody that's bought a gym before, any other small businesses, they could be good resources with regard to what they went through in the process. Rick Caro was one of the co-founders of URSA. He's an industry advisor and consultant. He's done a lot of work in this area. He has a group called Management Vision. He's consulted with me on this deck, and we've done many projects together. And then I can be reached at Bill McBride at bmc3.com. Again, I'll share the full deck with anybody that wants to have that. And I really feel honored and thankful that Laura, Garnett, and Chloe let me present today. I have a lot of respect for what you do, and we make a difference for people in their lives. So thank you for listening. And if there's any questions, I'll take those.
All right. Thank you so much, Bill. And I'm sure we got a lot of gratitude coming from the audience as well. We'll jump into the question and answer portion. So if any of you guys have any lingering questions, make sure you get them into that tool, and we'll get all of those answered that we can. And also feel free to raise your hand in Zoom, and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question out loud if that's preferable to you. So I was going through here. And,
is the cost method not a viable method for valuation?
Yeah.
The cost method can be a very viable method. The issue with the cost method is it doesn't give a buyer, it's sometimes hard to get a transaction done that way because the buyer wants to make sure that they have something of value going forward and that's going to really come down to the revenue of the business and the business model. If you were going to sell off your assets piecemeal or as a group, like sell all your equipment, cost method makes a little more sense in that kind of situation. But when we're dealing with an operating business, most people are going to hone in on performance of the business from a revenue and go forward entity standpoint.
Yeah, and I might add to that, it also doesn't account for the fact that you have members, and there isn't really, you're not selling a product in the sense that you have physical inventory that you're recuperating costs for. It's not a forward-looking methodology.
And I mean, with that said, I mean, again, these are just options and scenarios that I have found to be that make the most sense from my operator's perspective.
And we had another question here which had a lot of upvotes around what are the main valuation methodologies. We cover that pretty well in the slides, so um, I'm going to go ahead and mark that answered. But if anyone has any clarifying questions they'd like to ask about those different methods and why maybe the income method might be most preferable, feel free to type in another question for that. Um, Oh, here's an interesting one. Might just be interesting to get your opinion what you've seen happening in the fitness industry, which probably has a higher number of transactions, I would assume, than we have seen in the climbing world. So someone's asking if it seems like it'd be a great strategy right now to go around and buy climbing gyms at what we could assume would be distressed prices. Um, I I don't know if we're seeing a lot of activity in that in the climbing world, but what have you seen in the fitness world, and how have people been approaching that in that with that larger number of businesses?
As far as, say again, Garnett, as far as
Oh, yeah.
the what
So in the fitness industry around the pandemic and what's been happening, have you seen a larger number of transactions, people going around and actively trying to conglomerate or pick up businesses at distressed prices?
I think people are starting to look at that. 24-hour fitness closed, I think, 130 locations with their bankruptcy restructure. Um, Gold's Gym filed bankruptcy, restructuring, and closed, I want to say 30 earlier and then 30 at the time they did that. So there's a lot of spaces now that you're seeing that are going to be coming available, but I'm not sure how many have actually closed or people have picked them up yet. But again, it is an opportunity right now to pick up additional space where a fitness center might have been in your local market, because there is going to be, Piper Jeffries investments, they say upwards of 30% of the traditional fitness market, fitness health club market could go away, could contract. You're seeing a big growth in Peloton, Mirror, Tunnel, SoulCycle with regard to their online product and service. So I don't know about you guys, but it's hard to find a bike right now. It's hard to find dumbbells right now. It's hard to find rollerblades right now. A lot of those types of things are being bought up. So if you are looking to acquire other lifestyle businesses in the fitness arena, or to expand your climbing offerings into other retail spaces, there are locations available and coming available. It's also, for the same reason, an ideal time to talk to your landlord, because your landlords might be pressed with other vacancies and other small businesses that didn't make it. So if you have a viable business model but need some support, now is a great opportunity to renegotiate. Again, I want to emphasize, think long-term on that renegotiation. Don't just think 3 to 6 months. You'd rather have a long-term solution that makes your business more profitable than just surviving for 3 months with a short-term deal.
Yeah, that's a great point to just inject a little optimism in there that, yeah, maybe even just opening up a second location is an opportune time for that activity as well. Um, you covered this a little bit in your slides, and those slides will be available later. Someone's asking what a reasonable multiplier would be on their EBITDA for like a gym that's in the 1 to 5 million range. And you did post some numbers up there, but I was wondering if you could delve into where you might have gotten those multipliers, and it might be a little bit tough for you, but if you see any differences potentially between the fitness side and climbing side on what those multipliers would be.
I'm not as versed in the climbing side transaction part, but the numbers I get are from transactions that have taken place, primarily with independent club transactions.
Okay.
A 3 to 4 multiple on EBITDA is, reasonable. If you have, some secret sauce and some special stuff going on, you might be able to push that up 4.5, 5.5. But 3 is kind of 3 to 4 is kind of where a well-run business, operating business, no real estate, is probably going to land. If you own the real estate, the multiples go up, obviously.
Yeah, and I think something that's a bit unique to climbing gym, many climbing gyms at the moment, we don't have nearly the geographical density that we see in the fitness side of things, and I would imagine that would play into this to no small measure as well. Have you noticed any difference in that multiplier on the fitness side? And there aren't many places in the U.S. where this is the case, but where there is a smaller number of gyms, or not as tightly packed number of gyms, impacting those multipliers?
Um, yeah, if there's less supply, um, by definition, the value of that supply will increase. So if there's not a lot of competition, and there's, like I said, the growth aspects of the market, again, that future earnings, there's some value to that, but people typically want to know that it's real based on trailing 12 months. So if you have limited supply in a growth market, the valuation should be more. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great reminder on that time frame for some of these transactions. That, since that trailing 12 months is so important. Uh, what are the timeframes you normally see in the fitness industry for sales?
It depends on the complexity of the site and the deal. If the financials are clean and the model's easy to understand, you can do a transaction, in as little as 3 months. I mean, theoretically, you could do it in 60 days. I like to plan for, the succession plan of the business and the exit plan of the business. So the more time you can, the more time you have to pull the levers. But once you have a deal, in play, 3 months is kind of the norm, or a reasonable amount of time.
All right. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, keep them coming in. We've got a couple questions that are specific to the what sort of companies might be looking at acquiring gyms or investing in gyms right at the moment. Uh, I would imagine you're not quite as well versed in that, Bill, but correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and pass those questions for now, and we can maybe cover those in future resources. All right, and here's an interesting question. What are the best methods to market the sale of the business? Personal networking, online business sale sites, Craigslist?
Yeah, I would do personal networking first and foremost. And that's tricky with regard to what I said about confidentiality and discretion. But whiteboarding everybody that could potentially be a buyer that you can think of, and thinking out of the box, and then if you have key members that are invest in various things, you might have conversations with them about what they look at with regard to lifestyle investments. But getting to know, what your staff and members' long-term goals are, what they're involved in, with regard to their businesses, doing it from a networking perspective to begin with. Once you contact your competitors to have conversations, or other gyms in the space outside of the neighborhood, outside of the market, outside of the city, word will get out. So you kind of want to be prepared and have all your ducks in a row before you start talking to people where you expect, word to get out.
Yeah.
So personal networking would be where I would start.
Yeah, and have you seen, on that subject of rumors and how those might impact your business, have you seen people using online sales posts or any of the online business selling websites that are out there? Have you seen any public awareness of those in the fitness industry that have had negative impacts on people?
No, I mean, there are some online tools where people will list clubs for sale, and it will say Pacific Northwest, 1,200 square foot, so you can have anonymous ads where you can find out if there's some interest there, and then you have them sign an NDA before you tell them who you are. So yeah, that's a good vehicle. you would want to, specifically look at the trades and where you think potential targeted buyers would be with regard to the space. I don't think it's Craigslist. We were joking about that. But targeting ads that are anonymous, even in local print and in online editions of local papers and so forth, if you're looking for somebody in your local market. Again, that's why I was kind of alluding to things like the regional Wall Street Journal, regional business trades as well. But again, I would focus locally, and I would stay anonymous, while you're building the pipeline of potential buyers.
Yeah, some great tips. Thank you. Looks like we have one more question. So if anyone else has anything else, make sure you type it in while we're answering this, and we'll make sure it gets addressed before we end for the day. But as of now, this is our last question for you. And that's around, the issue of personal guarantee. If you do have to go through a closure, and again, you're not a lawyer, so this won't be legal advice, but are there any creative ways or any time-tested ways to deal with personal guarantees during a harsher exit?
Yeah. Personal guarantees are, there's the personal guarantee on a bank loan with the bank, which I'm not sure how those are handled, but typically those would require some type of legal closure, like a foreclosure in a home, a bankruptcy of some sort, or restructuring that debt somehow. And so those you would work with the banker with. If it's personal guarantee with a landlord, again, it's a personal relationship. It's once he or she rents out the space to someone else, it can mitigate some of your financial obligation because they have reduced harm. But if they can't rent the space out for the remainder of your lease, you do have some challenges with those personal guarantees if the landlord wants to be aggressive. So it's best to work with your landlord and try your best to work with your bank. And then if you get into that situation where nobody's cooperating, nobody's working, you really are forced to at least consider looking at some of the bankruptcy options for the business.
All right. Well, thanks again, Bill. Can't thank you enough for all this information. If people have follow-up questions, you can always contact any of us as well. And I'm going to hand this over to Laura to just close us out with a few closing remarks. And thanks for all your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Garnet, and thanks, Bill. This has been really informative. So I think everybody's really grateful to you for that. Just wanted to make a few closing announcements and remind everyone that the CWA is moving to a monthly format for our community calls. So starting next month in August, about the middle of the month or so, we'll make an announcement about next month's community call. And part of the reason that we are moving to that monthly format is to make room for other content and other kinds of virtual events for you all. So we have pre-registration open for our Survive and Thrive workshop that we are organizing for the first week of September. The goal of that workshop is going to be to provide you with some time to take a step back from the daily grind and really focus on your future, do some strategic thinking, take some time to analyze your business model, and work with industry leaders and business experts to think through all of these things. So it'll be an interactive experience for gym leadership to really take some time and focus on their businesses. So you can sign up for the waiting list for that at climbingwallindustry.org/survive. And we'll be making more announcements, getting all the details of that together for you very soon. Additionally, we are doing our monthly reopening survey. So that is open as of this morning. You can access that at climbingwallindustry.org/reopening-survey. We have our May and June survey results dashboards already live on our Coronavirus Resource Hub, which is available at climbingwhilindustry.org/coronavirus. So you can go and check out the results of those 2 surveys. Those really focus a lot on reopening policies and procedures. And the focus of this July survey is going to be more around finances, financial outlook, kind of getting a sense of how things are going with the reopening process and the impact on your businesses at this point. So if you could take a few minutes to take that survey, that would be really helpful. We're kind of taking the temperature of how things are going on a monthly basis. So we're going to continue to do that and share those results. So just to wrap things up, thank you all so much for joining us today. The CWA is here for you. You can count on us for whatever needs you have and whatever's going on with you and your businesses. Our contact info is there. You feel free to reach out to any one of us on the CWA staff. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap it up. So thanks everyone again, and have a great rest of the day.